Welcome, everyone. As you're coming in today, we want to invite you to say hello in the chat, and we're going to get started in just a few moments. I'm so thrilled to be here today with Sabrina Horn. Welcome, Sabrina.
So great to be here. Hi, everybody.
So, as you're coming in today, we would love to know where you're calling in from so we can give you a shout out. And if you happen to be calling in today as part of professional development, in your organization. We'd love to hear about your organization as well. And I would remind you to please use the drop down menu to select all panelists and attendees so everyone can see your comments. So I love seeing that we have folks already from California, from New York, from Ontario, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Idaho, Philadelphia. Wait, more Idaho. And greetings at Southeastern Freight Lines in Columbia, South Carolina. We've got folks in the Bay Area and Ohio. Thank you, Rob, for joining all the way from the UK,
Yes.
um, all the states. Just a quick note, if you choose to live tweet today, we are going to use the hashtag make it, don't fake it. And we'd love to see your learnings and insights along the journey. Wow, so many of you joining live today. We're so glad to have you with us. And throughout today's event, we would encourage you to be thinking about your questions for Sabrina. So if you receive my emails, you know that I personally have a ton of questions for Sabrina. And if we have enough time, I might ask some of them, but we are really interested in you having the chance to share your questions for with Sabrina toward the end. In fact, we're going to bring you over if you would like to speak face to face with Sabrina later in the broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
We'll use the hand raise function later, and then you'll have the chance actually to come over and speak to Sabrina and ask her your question live in today's event. So we're going to begin with some prepared Q&A, and then later on in the event, invite you over to communicate with Sabrina directly. So as we dive in today, I do want to give you a little bit of background on Sabrina. We're having this webinar in celebration of her first book that came out earlier back in June, right?
Yes.
It
Yes.
came.
June 22nd.
And I think you might have a copy right behind you if you can see it behind Sabrina's shoulder. The book is Make It, Don't Fake It, Leading with Authenticity for Real Business Success.
There you
Amazing.
go.
So Sabrina is an award-winning CEO, a communications expert, advisor, and author, and she founded Horn Group, a PR firm with $500 and 5 years job experience, becoming one of the few female CEOs in Silicon Valley in the early 1990s. Over the 25 years that she led the Horn Group, her firm advised thousands of executives and their companies, from the hottest startups to the Fortune 500, and doing so with a special focus on authenticity. And so, as you might imagine, I just want to soak up everything there is to learn from Sabrina, and I hope that you will too. And before we dive into the content, we want to get a little sense of who you are in your organization and how this content will be relevant for you. So, we'd love to have your participation on this poll. And we'd like to know from you, what is your role in your organization? Are you a CEO? Are you an entrepreneur founder? Are you at the executive level in your organization? Are you a manager? Are you a frontline employee, or are you a student? And by knowing where you are in your organization, we'll have the chance to make sure that all of our comments and questions and responses can meet you where you are. So thanks to those of you who are taking the time to answer. And it's interesting to see where this all shakes out, and I'll share those results in just a moment. Sometimes I'll ask people to predict, but I don't really know how we could even begin to predict today. All right, so let's take a look at those results. It looks like, we have nearly every category represented, although only one student. So we do have a few CEOs on the call, a few entrepreneur founders, a few at the executive level, a big group of managers participating today, and then several who are frontline employees. And I know from our conversations, Sabrina, that being authentic is important no matter where you are in the
Yes.
organization or on your
Yes.
journey.
Exactly.
All right, thanks so much for participating in the poll. So as we dive in today, Sabrina, I'd love to start with this basic question that comes from the title of your book. Your title, Make It, Don't Fake It. What do you mean when you say fake it?
Right. That's a great place to start, right? And lay down maybe a few definitions. There's lots of ways that people fake it. And in doing my research, in writing my book, I was thinking about all the different ways that people fake it. And I created this diagram, which you'll see if you open the book, in one of the earliest chapters, it's called the fakeometer. And it outlines from the most innocent to the most egregious, awful behavior, the different ways that people can fake it. And so by way of background, like faking it actually has very innocent origins. In cognitive behavioral therapy in the 1920s, there was an Austrian psychotherapist named Alfred Adler, and he developed a technique called acting as if, which is simply, if you're not feeling very confident or you have an inferiority complex, you want to practice the behaviors that you wish you could exude. And you do that until you sort of become them. And that's a good form of faking it. It's just self-help as much as power posing, which Amy Cuddy developed, visualizing techniques, self-assessment, even dressing for success to feel more confident. That's all perfectly innocent. And then you start to cross the line, the line to bad faking it, right? When you do and say things that are at other people's expense for personal gain. And so we talk there about exaggerating the truth about what your product can do to an investor, minimizing the truth about what happened when you made a mistake, selective truth telling, which is when you're actually still telling the truth but leaving out certain facts, and that can be very dangerous, to off the charts like fraudulent criminal gaslighting and other egregious sorts of behaviors. Faking it has, and the reason why I chose this title, right, and to flip it on its ear, is that it has mutated through social media. It's become like business advice. It's like, if you don't fake it, you won't be successful. And I feel like we live in this culture where somehow integrity has become optional, and everything is wrong with that. So the reason why I wrote this book, and hence this title, is to push the reset button on leading with integrity and authenticity for long-term success. Because when you fake it, you might make it to step 2, but the truth always comes out, and you'll be exposed and set yourself back and ruin your reputation.
Well, and I think those temptations happen every day. So earlier today, Sabrina, I got a text from a client, a potential client actually, asking, "Hey, have you had a chance to look at my book yet?" And in that moment, I knew deep down, no, I didn't look at it yet. And so there's that, wanting to fake it to have a good reputation. But I feel like those things happen multiple times a day. So I'm wondering if we could dive in and talk about some of the other temptations CEOs or entrepreneurs or even managers might face that would cause us to want to exaggerate or minimize the truth.
Yeah, I mean, so there's lots of causes, right? But mostly, uh, it's because you're under constant pressure. There's a desire to succeed, but maybe you're also feeling a little insecure or not as confident as you otherwise might. Maybe you're behind on your number or your KPIs for the quarter, and you kind of feel like you need to stretch the truth a little bit. Or maybe you're a salesperson and you just have to win this deal in order to like make your quota. And so you overpromise what your product can do to a customer. I think other ways that other instances where people fake it are when you've made a mistake and you have to admit to it. And, as a manager, as a leader, that's embarrassing because you think you'll ruin your credibility and you'll be humiliated in front of your team. Most recently, I think crises, just being faced with a crisis can drive a person to fake it because you're not prepared. You're so shocked and overwhelmed. So what do? You make something up, right? Just to have a response, or you ignore the crisis, which is even worse, and shove it under the rug. So there's a broad range of reasons why people fake it, but it's usually stimulated and created by some sort of either insecurity or external factor.
Well, and I would love if you are a manager or an entrepreneur or an executive level person who has experienced this temptation to fake it. We'd love to hear your examples in the chat. Um, I did see that Elizabeth commented that not
Yeah.
overpromising is essential.
Yeah.
Ultimately, especially with overpromising, you're going to be found out
Right.
when the customer realizes that the software can't do what you promised or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing, like fake it till you make it may help you achieve some measure of short-term success, but it could take a day, a week, or a month, maybe longer than that. But the investor is going to do his due diligence and find out that your technology doesn't do what you said it would. The customer is going to use your product and return it and maybe post a blog about it that it sucked, right? And your employer, to whom you just lied about your resume, right, and your job experience, is going to do a reference check. So in the end, faking it doesn't help you make it. It actually helps you fail.
Yeah, that is really powerful. And some comments in the chat that when you're faking it, it snowballs like a lie. It's a
Yeah.
slippery slope.
Yeah.
So small fake it's make it easier the next time. So, are there some clear signs, Sabrina, to tell when someone is faking it? And something really similar, we talk a lot about people who might struggle with imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
and that's talked about so much right now. So, how is this like lack of integrity or integrity gap making it different than this imposter syndrome that people might deal
Yeah.
with?
So imposter syndrome is a super popular topic right now, and there are a lot of different definitions of it. I think there's a big difference. Imposter syndrome is the classic definition is this terrible feeling that that you don't deserve the success that you've achieved, and that you'll be exposed for being a fraud or an imposter. And the reason why is because you think that it was just a function of good luck or good timing, or someone handed it to you, when in fact you really achieved that success earnestly and honestly. So you feel like an imposter. Um, Now, what can happen in that situation is, and by the way, this can occur when, for example, you just got a promotion and you're kind of in a new team or a new environment, and people have different expectations of you, which may be higher or lower or at the same level where you actually are. Maybe you changed companies. You're just in a new environment, and that can lead to faking it, because you may feel so uncomfortable and awkward that you may start to behave in certain ways that you think these people are expecting of you. And if you do that to an extreme, then you truly are becoming an imposter, right? So there's ways of dealing with that, which is doing self-assessments and recording and playing back to yourself what you really actually have achieved, visualizing techniques, and surrounding yourself with a safety net of mentors who are going to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. Faking it, right, is when you're exaggerating the truth about something, or like what we've talked about, distorting the facts, and that's a different scenario than imposter syndrome.
That's helpful. So I have a question in the chat from Michelle. She says, faking it can include so much. Does it also depend on the organization and their commitment to allow folks to bring their authentic selves without that being held against them? And then another question is, do you feel code switching is faking it? Because this doesn't speak to lies or fraudulent actions, but can it contribute to keeping up with an image that isn't you?
Yeah. Okay. I
There's a
mean,
lot there.
there's a lot there. We
So
need
let's talk
another.
first. Yeah, let's talk first about, does faking it depend upon an organization's willingness to allow people to bring their authentic selves to work?
Yeah, I mean, this is so critical, and I wrote about this in chapter 4 about building an authentic brand, and this is all about core values. I mean, like everybody, this is a founder and an entrepreneur and a leadership team who, from the outset, lay out a list of core values of what they stand for and what they don't stand for, and building a culture by which those values are just infused. They're just visceral to how the company acts and behaves internally, but then also it's infused in every business process, from engineering to customer service to how employee performance reviews are conducted. on time and with care and with thought, right? So faking it is much less possible, right? Is much less of a possibility in a company where there is a set of core values that deal with integrity and honesty, and where, right, that's really like infused through the whole business. If that's not there, then of course there's a greater possibility and chance for those behaviors to start to creep in, and then they have to be corrected. So my thesis is, in one of the things I said, is that like it's so much easier to create a culture from scratch than it is to fix a dysfunctional one.
Yeah, that is true. So for those on the call who might be thinking about starting a company or might be in the early stages, this is definitely something to attend to, this infusing of the values from the very start.
Yes.
Um, there's some great comments and questions in the chat that I don't want to miss because they apply to what we're talking about now. So David is wondering if you can talk about leaders faking it, pretending to care about employees when it is clear they don't.
Yeah, how about that? Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, that is very often the reality of the situation. And it's like when you can tell, I think this was one of your questions actually, Becky, like, are there clear signs to tell if someone's faking it? It's like the guy who says, "Hey, how you doing?" And they really care about your career progression, and they have this conversation with you, and then nothing happens. Or if it just sounds too good to be true, then and you're just a token or a pawn to make the CEO look good at an appearance. Like that stuff, you can see right through it, and then like that leader will become a loser, because that's they're going to lose their credibility. People can see through that stuff, especially right now, especially during these times.
Well, so since you went to that, to be a leader is to lose, can we
Mm,
talk more about that? I know the book talks about um, it, equating these two things, leader and loser.
yes.
So can we dive into that a bit more?
Yeah. So one of the chapters is, it's actually called Leader and Loser both begin with a capital L. And the reason why I wrote that chapter is because, like, all these leadership books talk about how you can win and be successful, but there are very few books that talk about how to rebound from losing. And when you're a leader, you're going to lose more often than you would like to. It's part of the job. And how you rebound from losing says everything about you as a leader. And so what I mean by that is, okay, so you blew the meeting, you didn't win the deal, for whatever reason. You, the leader, the manager, whoever you are, pull together a post-mortem with your team, and you yourself can start off not to point fingers and place blame on other people, but exercise this wonderful notion of humility in leadership, and not to act like a loser, right, but to just say like, wow, well, okay, we really screwed that up. I really feel like I should have done a better job in preparing to meet with this CEO. Or it's clear like we need to do more research. I'm going to put more funds behind our R&D team to make sure these RFPs are stronger in these situations, right? And then what that does, right, it makes people feel safer, and it levels the playing field, and it creates a learning culture where you can learn from each other and put into practice effectively the mistakes that you made and what you learned from them, so that hopefully they don't happen again. But I got to tell you, there were so many times when I went home on a Monday night feeling like, total loser. But I've got to get up the next day and act like a leader, because people are watching me, and you've got to pull it together so that you're strong for them.
Well, so I hope it's okay. One of my very favorite stories in the book is when you talk about the presentation that you made to the like to a
Oh,
possible client related
yeah,
to the Olympics. And
yeah.
would you share that story with us here?
Oh my
You
God.
know, you felt like a loser that day, right? But you still
Oh,
had to keep leading. So how did you rebound from that?
yeah. So you can read the story in the book and, it might make you laugh or maybe cry or shake your head, but it will go down in history as the worst sales pitch ever. I had just come back from a brutal press tour. It's in those days, it was like not like an IPO roadshow, and had to turn around and fly back to the East Coast to give a presentation, the presentation of a lifetime, which would have put my firm in a different league to win the IBM information systems piece of the Olympics. They were the information systems provider. This was in 1996, I believe. And we had just printed these beautiful overhead transparencies in color, which was the new technology of the day. And the Olympic torch was like in its vibrant orange colors, and all the Olympic rings were like in their appropriate colors. And we were put into this room to present, which was like a closet. And it wasn't even a conference room. There was a projector, but there was no wall or screen for us to project on. So we presented our images on this corner of the room, which distorted the words kind of and made them uneven. And the decision maker wasn't there, but we were told to proceed. And then he walked in halfway through the meeting. And don't you hate that? So what he did was he's literally flipping through the deck, like, where are your big ideas, Sabrina? Where are the big ideas? What's your strategy? Where's the budget? I don't see the budget. And he wouldn't let me answer any one of these questions. He's just rapid firing, asking me these questions, right? And so I'm just standing there. At one point, I just felt so utterly exhausted, and he had really rattled my cage. So I'm standing and looking down over this overhead projector, which is showing my slides, and I start to cry. And the tears are making the orange of the Olympic torch and the words on the slides like blend together into this brownish liquid that started to like leave a trail and drift off to the side. And you could see it all on this horrible wall that was contorted. And people, literally the other IBMers, were like looking up at the ceiling. They're like, is there a leak? And so my colleague Elizabeth Orgel, she just tapped me on the shoulder and she said, "Hey, Sab, I think it's time to go." And so I just went to the bathroom and sobbed into these paper towels from the wall dispenser and drank a lot of wine on the flight back home.
So how after that did you rebound as a leader?
Well, I took some of my own medicine and I did one of those postmortems, and like, I had completely humiliated myself and my firm. So I had nothing to lose, right? And so I just sat there and I said, like, what could we have done differently? How could I have run that meeting more effectively? How could I have taken control of it? And sometimes you just need to call a spade and realize, like, okay, you could have done anything you could have done and wouldn't have corrected the situation. And what I should have done is just said, you know what, doesn't look like today is going to be a great day for us to present our ideas to you. So I think maybe we can just reschedule. And then I would have preserved our dignity a little bit. And, I don't think we would have ever rescheduled that meeting, but at least I would have left holding my head a little bit higher.
Yeah, I want to just commend you for sharing that story, Sabrina. It's so helpful to hear just the realness and the authenticity of those moments. And when you say that a leader to be a leader is to lose, just knowing that it's normal to experience
Yeah.
those setbacks and failings.
Yeah. Like, you are going to lose and you are going to make mistakes, and it's okay. Like, you're not a superpower, but you do need to be humble enough to admit when you have made a mistake in front of your team, and level the playing field for everybody else, so that they do the same thing. And then make sure you institutionalize whatever ideas you come up with so that those mistakes don't happen again.
Yeah, that is such powerful advice. So, in the book, you also talk about making decisions based on reality. And I'm wondering if you can expand on what you mean by that.
Making decisions based on reality. Yeah. Okay. So, I think there are a lot of definitions about leadership, and one of mine is the following: that leadership is all about making the right decisions at the right time based on reality and the truth. And what do we know about reality and the truth? They can be very, very hard to face. The truth hurts sometimes. And um, the reason why I make this comment is because that's why it's so easy for leaders to fake it, right? It's hard to face reality. It's hard to lead with integrity because it means by definition that you're grounded in reality and that you're facing these situations head on. I don't know too many entrepreneurs and CEOs or managers who love the idea of having to do a layoff because their company, or they didn't make the number that quarter, right? Or having to do a product recall because of a mistake you made. That's hard to face. It's much easier to fake it, shove the problem under the rug, or blame it on someone else, or delay making a decision, which is even worse. So, it's particularly important in times of crisis that you just, for the privilege of being a leader, whether you're a top manager of your team or your department or your company, you have to take that on, and you've got to deal with it, because the sooner you do, you can find a path forward and lead your people to the other side.
Thank you, Sabrina. So, Stephanie's asking in the chat, doesn't this culture of don't fake it start at the top? And I'm
Yes.
wondering if you could talk a little bit about why you think so many leaders, particularly, adopt that fake it till you make it mantra.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. Yes, not faking it does start at the top. It starts with establishing a list of core values and holding yourself to them, and having a leadership team and advisors and mentors who will tell you what you need to hear and not what you want to hear. And I mean, that the reason why people adopt the fake it till you make it mantra is because it is easier. They don't, it means you doing things the right way means doing things the hard way. And and it and not every company thinks about their core values, at every annual meeting, but you should every year. Every leadership team or manager, I don't care who you are, even if you're a student, right? You look at here's who I am, and here's what I stand for, and how did we live up to that this year? Where did we fall down? What processes do we need to fix to really live up to that? And then communicate that often and frequently to your customers and to your employees, right? Because they want to know what you stand for. Everybody gets up every morning to fight the good fight for somebody, and they want to have a sense of belonging. So right now, particularly in the aftermath of the pandemic, this is so vitally important, and a lot of young companies don't think about it, to their detriment.
Hmm. Do you want to say a little bit more about that? How you're seeing people, you know, miss these opportunities post pandemic?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think right now we have until, I would say, the end of the year, or maybe Q1 of next year. There's a window of opportunity. If you're ever going to push the reset button, it's now. And I have this thing where I talk about the 3 V's, the alignment of the 3 V's: your values, hopefully you have them, and they've clearly articulated; your vision, which is your, how you want to change the world, um, and your value proposition, which is what you offer your customers, and how you're going to achieve that vision. Those 3 things need to be in alignment, and now would be a good time to take a look at them and to see, do customers still want what we have to offer? Do they still want to hear about it in the same way? My guess is probably not. The messaging and the marketing maybe needs to change. And we've heard so much about the use of empathy, right, recently, and understanding. People want to be understood. They want to express themselves, and they want to be heard. And so I've talked a lot about this, and it's maybe the topic for another webinar, but like there's a whole different language that people need to use now in marketing and reaching their customers.
Thanks for sharing that. And I think those three V's are really powerful to see how they align. Um, so let's talk about values particularly related to honesty and integrity.
Mhm.
And sometimes I've heard people say that, like for example, integrity is one of the 6 core values that my company and I have listed on our website and that we talk about and rally around. But I've heard people say before that honesty, integrity are throwaway values, that, of course you should have them. So I'm curious what you think businesses or organizations can do to uphold those, key and
Mhm.
foundational values of honesty and integrity.
Right. Well, I mean, there are lots of things that any company or department or team can do. First of all, you as a leader or as a leader wannabe, you need to lead by example. And I learned this in a very small way. Like, if I leave my coffee cup in the sink, everybody else will. And I don't have any excuse to tell people to put their dishes in the dishwasher if I don't do so myself. So it's a small example, but you get what I mean, right? If I don't conduct myself with integrity and have the guts to have those tough conversations or face reality, then why should anybody else do that either? So you have to lead by example. Next, I think it's really important to reward people who demonstrate those values, particularly in the face of adversity or a huge challenge, right? To reward them publicly for how they embodied the company's values. It could be a really tough customer sale, or maybe it was turning around a customer who was going to jump ship, right? It could be the engineer who fixed a huge product flaw. And so how does that correlate back to a core value? Well, maybe it's integrity, maybe coming forward with having made that mistake. Like integrity is, as I said at the beginning, is never optional. And it's not a throwaway value. And there's so many ways that you can define it and institute it into your business processes. Take every department in your company and think about how integrity plays a role inside that group, and do that every year or every quarter, and then tell your employees about it. And not just once, you got to communicate often and frequently about it. Um, and then I think the last recommendation I would have is to find those champions, right? It's not just you and your leadership team or your number two. It's like it's the intern. It could be anybody, who really believes in that and can help you protect those values and keep them in place. Like it's okay to say to somebody like, dude, like it's not cool to talk to somebody like that. You know, that's not how we do things here. And um, even that like is upholding a value.
Mhm. Well, I love this comment from Rob. He says he thinks the key um, here is that we all think we have the values, but many compromise them from time to
Mhm.
time and fool ourselves into thinking that we are justified this time. So it's hard to stick to values when it's inconvenient.
Yep, it's true. It's a really fair comment. And the problem is that if you do it once, then that was easy. So you do it again, then you do it again, and then you do it again, right? I mean, look, I am nobody's lily white in all this. I believe that authenticity is like beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder. What I think is authentic, you may not think is authentic, and vice versa. So everyone has to decide for themselves whether you're a manager or a homemaker or you're a dog walker, who's about to come to my front door.
Oh,
um,
no.
um, that like within the boundaries of your values, like how far you're gonna stretch it, and why, and put your head down on the pillow at night and still feel okay with yourself, right? Like we're all human. And my point is not to tell people how to behave. My point is to just make people realize that this faking it is just permeated our society. It's like been baked into us. We don't know the difference between the truth and a hoax sometimes. And we're so numb to it. We just like, whatever, it's just noise now. But you cannot build a sustainable business that way. The truth will catch up with you. And you have to make that decision for yourself. Like, you're going to do it the right way and the hard way, or are you just going to, keep stretching it and getting more brazen with it, and then face the consequences. And may I just add another thing? Like, when you're faking it, there's also a lot of anxiety that comes into play, because while you're waiting to be exposed for what your lie or whatever it was you did, right? You're not feeling too good about yourself. So there's a side effect there.
Certainly so. Well, we want to transition to be able to welcome some folks who are on the call to talk to you face to face and share some of their thoughts and questions and ideas. So we want to invite you to use the hand raise function, which you'll find in the bottom of your Zoom panel. When I see that your hand is raised, what I'll do is bring you over as a panelist, and you can turn on your camera and unmute your mic and talk face to face with Sabrina. And we'll ask you to keep your comments brief so that we can get to as many people as possible. And I do see that there is someone with a hand raised, so I will start with that person who's been waiting for a while, and hopefully all the technology will work. And so I'll continue to look for other hands that are raised and bring you over as well. I see Lisa is coming. Um, it just takes a few seconds for that transition. So let's see. I'm going to look for some cameras if you're able to turn them on, or I'm going to look for an unmuted microphone, and then people can take a turn speaking. Lisa, would you like to speak?
Thanks. I didn't really mean to raise my hand, but as I've been listening to you, I do have a question, and I'm just wondering. One of my favorite leadership books is Tom Collins's Good to Great, and he talks about that level 5 leader who always looks in the mirror when things go wrong. And it just kind of spoke to me what you were talking about, with to be a leader is to be a loser, about how the leader will, in the post-mortem kind of come together and say, hey, this is on me, and taking that on. And, that's very rare today, because, again, we're all trying to put on a show, and that's really difficult. I guess my question would be to you, Sabrina, how do you feel as leaders, not only can we model that behavior, and how, I guess, what do you think is the best way to really make that resonate with your team? Like, what are some things that are just, how frequently, and how do you encourage people to bring their authentic self and be a loser in front of everybody? So hard.
Yeah. And I love that book too, by the way. It was one of my favorite books. It's not just a one-time thing, right? You truly have to believe in the power of humility, and you have to be a humble person, right? It's not something you can fake. And the first thing is to realize that it's not a sign of weakness. It's absolutely a sign of strength. But it's also like, humility is on parallel with empathy. And like, most people, I remember sitting in our conference room, and everybody, like, there were no chairs left in the room except for the two next to me, because people didn't want to sit next to me, so like there's this barrier between the CEO or the manager and their team. And you don't want to be so untouchable or unapproachable, right? So it's literally like, you know what? I'm not going to bite you. There's this chair right here. I know you want to sit in it. Why don't you come sit next to me? Okay. And it's being consistent. It's so important to be consistent, because you're building that sort of trust with your team, right? And to say, like, I love what you said the other day. I heard you in a meeting, and I love what you said about customer service or whatever it is. And I would love for you to talk about that for a minute, because I really think that that's super important. And then let them talk, invite them to talk, and praise them publicly, right? And then turn around and say, like, I think this is a really big issue, but it's not for me to give all the answers either. I don't have all the answers. I have questions though. What do you think? Can we just stop this meeting for 15 minutes? Because I want to hear your guys' ideas. And if they don't come up with anything because they don't are afraid to talk, or they're, worried that they'll be skewered later on, right? Then, right, I called on people until finally it became a habit, and it became a way that we operated. And I made it okay for people to contribute their ideas. And I even made that part of our values, right? Like I was open to any business opportunity as long as it made good business sense. And I invited my staff to contribute certain new service ideas and ways of doing things that made our company better. And not every idea was implemented, but I made sure that everybody knew that their voice was their opinion was important and that they would be heard. And I stated that repeatedly. It was in our handbook, so it's like a sense around approach. It's not just you say it once and it's done. It doesn't work that way.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Barbara, I'm going to call on you next. You might need to unmute.
Sorry. I've been enjoying the conversation, and something that I learned early on is the importance of storytelling. And so I'd like to hear what you think about it, and storytelling to happen before a problem starts. So that people have guidelines of either things that are not authentic and issues that happen, but also examples of where someone was really authentic and the importance of them being authentic. So tell me about what you think about storytelling and even hypothetical issues where, what would you do if this happened, and have people discuss that up front?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, my profession is public relations, so I'm all about storytelling. And there's a very effective use of storytelling to avoid problems or issues before they become problems. And a leader's job really oftentimes is to see past those hurdles and avoid them right before you come up to them. And storytelling is, what you can call it anything you want, storytelling, or just like, hey, can we have a conversation about when we pitch really big customers? Or can we have a conversation about safety protocols for the next time there's a storm, or whatever it is, and relaying those stories most effectively from the leader is when it's the most powerful. But the key is to over communicate and communicate frequently through multiple channels. So through video, through email, several times, through the staff, through managers, not just from one voice. That is really super powerful and important, especially during times of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, like what we've been living through. And the other nice thing about storytelling is that it's not like an edict or a statement. It's engaging, and to tell a story, but to involve other people in it. Like we're telling a story right now, this conversation that we're having, get other people's opinions. But you can't do it effectively unless you sort of tee it up right. And, you can say like, hey guys, next week at our meeting, I want to have a conversation about XYZ. And so that's how you create an environment for a good storytelling session that serves a purpose.
I agree. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Barbara. It's great to have you. I also have Mohammed on the line, and Mohammed, if you'd like to unmute and speak to Sabrina, you are welcome to do so. Sometimes people use that hand raise function, and so I'm going to give you a chance if you'd like to unmute. Otherwise, so Sabrina, I mentioned that I have just 1,000 questions for you always, and thinking about your career and the many employees that you had over 25 years of having your firm in place. And so I'm curious how you handled the transition of being a leader who had direct contact with all of your employees to then kind of bringing up a leadership team and being less connected to the entire team. How did you still maintain authenticity and stay connected as your team grew?
Oh, this is such a great discussion topic. It is true that as your company grows, there's no way you can humanly connect with every single person in person, particularly when you're in multiple locations, right? But it was always my number one task and obligation and responsibility to touch as many people as I could wherever I went. And I even instituted a mentor program for our employees where I would sit down and have coffee with one of our folks to talk about what they wanted to do with their career and beyond the time that they would be working with me. And or just to hear like what's going on in their lives, beyond work. I communicated as much as I could through the channels that were available to us over time, but the best way is to just walk the halls. And I relied on my managers and my leadership team to tell me who was struggling or who had just like won a big deal or like made a huge career move, like in presenting some incredible deck to a client or a prospect, and then I would write that down and I would make it a point to go talk to that person or call them or send them a birthday card or whatever it was so that they knew that I was listening to them and cared about them. And it takes a lot of work, but and the bigger your company gets, the harder it is. But it was so essential to upholding the values that I had chosen for my company, which is that everybody's voice is important, and that people matter. So I guess the answer to your question there is you do have to rely on your leadership team to give you that input, which also forces them to keep in touch with their teams more directly and stay connected.
Thank you. That's super helpful. So we have a question in the chat from Rob. He's wondering if you can talk about your take on work-life balance. He thought it was a unique and liberating idea in the book that you gave up on the idea of balance.
Yeah, forget it. I tried, I went to these seminars, I read the books, I'm a single mom running a company. And I just thought like, okay, by definition, you can't have work-life balance because life is always changing and work is always changing. They're always in flux, swirling around you. And so having that be sort of a state of being is almost virtually impossible to achieve. So instead, I came up with this notion of finding moments of balance every day. And whether it's 5 minutes in between meetings, I have this thing called a Sabrina moment where if I have 10 meetings a day, I'm going to go crazy. Like I'll be a basket case by the 9th or the 10th meeting. But I would literally go to the ladies' room and take 5 minutes to wash my hands with warm water and feel the warm water running over my wrists, which somehow made me feel clean and soothed and peaceful, and use the soap to sort of kind of get rid of what was in the last meeting and reset for the next meeting. That for me was all that it took. For other people, it's walking around the block. It's getting a cup of coffee by yourself or sitting on a park bench. I have been known to go sit at the bar and have a glass of wine when I really needed to, there's nothing wrong with that. To find that moment of balance, right? That will get you through the day and it will make you feel whole. The other thing that I talk about in my book is this notion that everybody gets 100% of me at the right time. So that means at 1 o'clock, my employee has 100% of my attention. At 2 o'clock, it's my client. At 4 o'clock, it's reviewing a contract. At 5 o'clock, it's clearing out email. And then at 6 o'clock, it's making dinner for the kids, and prioritizing my time in that way, right? So that at each hour of that day, somebody has 100% of me. And of course, there's always distractions and phones and blah, blah, blah. But if you think about it that way, even that can create more of a sense of balance for yourself.
Well, and one of the things I loved in the book was when you talked about this day that you had so many competing priorities. I think you had, a parent who had some hospital issues, you had a kid who broke an arm, you had a pitch to deliver. Like you described this day, and I think like, wow, like how do you even make it through that day?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so you have to get good at, I wrote about some techniques for things like that in one of the chapters, compartmentalizing. And like, I literally would think like, okay, I have 6 boxes over my head right now. One is my kid who just broke her elbow. One is my client who just went public on the NASDAQ. One is my dad who was just put into hospice care, and so on and so on. And I'm like, I can't think about anything beyond just getting to the end of today. And if I get to the end of today, then we will be successful. And I had to move the needle forward on every one of those buckets and multitask. Like, while I'm in the emergency room, I'm reviewing a proposal to take care of something else and having a chat with my mom, or, whatever it is. You do what you have to do. The problem is when you have day after day after day like that, it wears you down. And boy, you need to be resilient for periods like that. But there are techniques and some tools and mental maps in the book too, to help with that.
So I have a question that came in a while ago from, I think, Raju, and he wants to know what your ideas are connecting authenticity and self-awareness.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Sure, connecting authenticity and self-awareness.
Well, that's huge. I mean, authenticity is grounded in being self-aware and looking at yourself in the mirror and being very honest about who you are, who you want to be, and where there's maybe room for some improvement here. And being authentic means being honest about those things, but knowing what they are. So you can't know what they are unless you have that kind of inclination to have those conversations with yourself. I mean, this is why leadership is so hard, because we don't necessarily want to acknowledge our mistakes or where we're not performing the way we should, or correcting mistakes from our past. But authenticity and self-awareness are inextricably tied.
Thank you for that, Sabrina. And I think, when we can be honest about our own shortcomings, it can free other people up to admit theirs as well. So many comments. I really like the idea of those boxes, the visualizations that you shared in the book as well.
Yeah, that's you guys can read it in the book, but I call it the make it happen box, because you need to make it happen. And you use this box to put in every issue that you're dealing with, and every side of the box, it's a 3-dimensional cube. Every side of the box allows you to put down a factor associated with that issue or that challenge of the moment. And you start to outline the things that are tied to that. And then you start to find like what is related to something else. And then sequences start to appear of what you need to do next. And you can circle them. And, the back of a cocktail napkin will do just fine. This is not like a McKinsey analysis, right? This is like, I need to make a move. I need to do it by the end of today. And this can help you think that through, particularly if you have multiple issues going on at the same time. And sometimes, like I said, success is just getting to like tomorrow, and that's okay.
So Ray's asking a question about looking at these visuals. I think some of those graphics are in the book. So we
Yes,
can
they are.
look for those boxes. Potentially, we might be able to put an image of that box into our follow-up email. Good feedback that it would be helpful if we'd had a slide and we could have shown that to you in the moment. Funny comment from Michael that he missed the talk about work-life balance because he had a delivery at the front door. So there's a question here from, I think, Johan. He says, being authentic is being aware. Do you agree, Sabrina? So sometimes faking it is being conscious. Your thoughts, please. I'm not sure what that means. Maybe you can clarify. Yeah. The difference between awareness and consciousness is crucial. He
Yes,
says to follow up.
yes. Yeah, I mean, yes, it's the same argument about authenticity and self-awareness, right? It's being conscious of like, here's what I would say to all of you, right? At the end of this session or at some point, this week or next week, ask yourself the last time you faked it and why you did it. What caused you to fake it? Were you under pressure? Did you not know the answer? Were you afraid? Why did you fake it? And like, what did you actually do? And then ask yourself, like, how did you feel about that? Did you pull it off? Or were you caught? Are you still waiting to be caught? Like, how do you feel about that? And then really dial into like, okay, so if you know what caused you to fake it and you had the chance for a do-over, what would you do differently? Would you go and was it just that you didn't know something? So you want to disarm fear and organize the risk. You want to fight the unknown with what is known. You want to get more information. That little extra tidbit of knowledge may be everything you need to take your strategy to the next level. And or talk to a mentor that hopefully you have to do a reality check. Like, am I thinking straight on this? Like, if I do this, what could happen? Right? Things like that can help you to not fake it and to instead lead with authenticity and be like, you know what, if I fake it and I do this again and I get caught, or even if I don't, how am I going to feel about it? And what does that say about me? So like, if the journey is like the reward, you want to make it a good one. And so that's, about being conscious, like if the discussion is around being conscious about faking it, that's what I would ask you guys to think about. Like, when was the last time you did it and how would you do it over if you could?
Awesome. So we do want to make sure that people know how they can learn more from you, Sabrina, on this journey. The first thing to say is that Make It, Don't Fake It is available on all the online retailers, including Amazon. We would love, if you haven't had a chance to buy the book, to send you to buy the book. It was a #1 new release in business ethics, which has been exciting to see. If you're not a fan of Amazon, you can check out bookshop.org or other online retailers to buy the book. If you have already read the book and loved it, we are always grateful for your Amazon review. Only a few sentences of an honest review can help other readers discover the book. If you think this book would be helpful in your organization, we would encourage you to buy the book in bulk for your colleagues, teams, or clients' customers. Or if you're interested in inviting Sabrina to talk at your next event, you can feel free to contact her directly by email, sabrina@sabrinahorn.com. And we will have a recording of today's session available. We'll be sending it out with our follow-up email. Sabrina, I'm going to kick it back to you for any kind of final comments and inspiration.
Yeah, I mean, I just have so enjoyed this conversation, and all of you guys in the chat. Like, I wish I could address all of your comments and questions. So please do reach out to me if you'd like. And, let me just say, like, you don't need to fake it because you have everything that it takes to be successful. And again, if the journey is the reward, let's make it a good one and lead by example and show others how to lead with authenticity for long-term success.
Amazing. Thanks, Sabrina.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.